Yeah, introduce yourself and then also the party.
Sure. Kia ora. My name's Daniel Ebb. I am the deputy leader of the Opportunity Party.
Why did you get into politics and the Opportunities Party?
Oh, good question. For the last 10 years, I've run a communications consultancy working in food systems, working like alongside farmers to build cool stuff in the sort of regenerative and food equity space. So like farmer capability development, a program like a social impact program to help urban Kiwis get back out on farm, that kind of good stuff. But for a long time, I felt like the system settings weren't right, and it was too difficult to make change. It should be easier to do the right thing. Um, and a good example is that we work on food equity programs, helping ensure that everyone has access to nutrition. Um, and yes, we're sort of trying to fix a problem where 25% of Kiwis live in food insecurity, but at the same time, we're trying to export health to the world. So it's like that's an example of a system setting that's not quite right. So personally, I decided to get into politics because if the system settings are aligned to the kind of outcomes that most of us want to see, good, healthy people, healthy environment, strong, sustainable businesses, then building things to make those things happen will be a lot easier. And the Opportunity Party is the only party that I can see that has that sort of long-term systematic view and approach. We don't do culture wars. We don't do performative politics. We just want to get the system settings right, and we're prepared to do things for the long haul. And I really resonate with that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so you kind of touched on it already, but why is the Opportunity Party different from all the other parties?
Well, we're not in Parliament, so that's one, which I sometimes say is our greatest weakness, and other times our greatest strength. Um, I think we're a centrist party that um, that combines some of the best elements of each of the sort of ideological extremes. So people who sort of are more aligned to the Libertarian Act approach will see some things in our platform that they like and other things that they don't. Some people who are more aligned to sort of the green side of politics will see things in our platform that they like and some things that they don't. And that to me is a representation of being evidence based. We don't think that all our solutions come from the left. We don't think that all our solutions come from the right. What will work for us in down here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, is a mix that speaks to our social uniqueness, our geographic uniqueness, our economic uniqueness. So we have to pick and choose the things that fit from the sort of smorgasbord of ideologies. And the way that we make that choice is by following the evidence. So yeah, I'm pretty proud to say that we are a centrist party, even though sort of centrist doesn't mean a whole lot when you actually break down the political spectrum, left and right. But yeah, we we make decisions for the right reasons, not for ideological reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it's pretty hard to get across that 5% threshold. Why do you think you can kind of do it this time?
Yeah, that's fair, and yeah, it is a challenge. No party's ever done it before without winning an electorate seat. This time feels different. I'm sure everyone, this is our fourth election we've contested, and I'm sure every deputy leader has sat there with 6 months ago and been, no, 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 this year's different. This year's different. But this year actually does feel different. There's such a mood for mood sort of against the status quo. I'll notice that in most polling that asks that sort of big question, is New Zealand on the right or wrong track? Pretty reliably, 50% of people will say it's on the wrong track. And that's borne out by some pretty stark data points. 200 people leaving the country, particularly young families leaving the country every day, mostly for Australia for better economic opportunities. You know, in wages that have just not kept up with inflation for a number of years. House prices increasingly out of reach, even though they've softened. So I think there's an appetite out there for something new because it is abundantly clear that the political system that we've relied on for the last, you know, however long, many decades, is now really starting to creak and fail and falter. And that creates a space for something new, and that's us.
Yeah, yeah. You guys have a message of it's time to send a new generation of leaders into Parliament. Can you kind of explain that message and why it's important?
Sure. Well, we're kind of young. Or I mean, like I'm 39. We call ourselves youth adjacent. So, that is a touch on the younger side for a lot of the parties, but it's not just an age thing. I think it's more of like a perspective thing. There is no one in the party that has been a career politician before. We all come from a sort of a mix of different business backgrounds. A lot of us have started and run our own businesses before. A lot of us come from a social impact space or a conservation space. And so we think we represent a new type of politician, one that is to sort of lean into our color, blue green. Like we don't believe that the environment and the economy are in competition with each other. We believe that we can build businesses that are actually nature positive. Like not just we can believe this has to be the way that we move forward. Like we can't keep extracting from nature. And so we represent a different mindset that is prepared to move to a new, more sustainable economic model. And we're not afraid of that. We lean into that. We built our businesses and our lives, nurturing the sort of the seeds of that new economic model. And so yeah, new generation, we're not just young, we also think differently.
Yeah, yeah.
Young adjacent, youth adjacent, 39 years old for God's sakes, not young.
Yeah. So as you probably already know, the cost of living, fuel prices, power, it's all hitting everyone pretty hard. Kind of what is your party kind of gonna do about that?
Sure. Yeah, that's massive, right? I mean, it's not just the Strait of Hormuz closes, therefore we have a cost of living crisis. This is a systemic issue that has only gotten worse over the last, you know, 10 odd years, sort of pre-COVID, even it was starting to get bad. So you can't just do one thing. That said, there is one thing that we think will make a massive difference. The centerpiece of our tax policy is a citizen's income, which is effectively a universal basic income. It's $370 a week paid to effectively all adult New Zealanders. For those who are on lower incomes, this represents the largest tax cut in New Zealand history. Or lower income, lower New Zealanders who are on lower incomes and who rent. This is the largest tax cut in New Zealand history. Basically, it is the citizens' income itself is balanced with a land value tax. It's effectively how we pay for it. And so within one policy, we are kind of rebalancing the tax system, which for a long time has incentivized people to put money into property. It's not that people are bad or doing the wrong thing. The market and our tax system has said, hey, put your money in property, that's where you'll get the best return. And shock horror, money flows to where it gets the best return. So the settings have been wrong for a long time. So the combination of the citizens' income and the land value tax basically realigns our tax system towards what people need, which is enough money to get by, some financial security to retrain or go to study or look after a sick relative or spend more time in your community. It aligns our tax incentive to provide for that as opposed to incentivizing people to put their money into property. Property is important, but it's an unproductive asset. People are productive. So we think that that would be a significant sort of buffer towards cost of living pressures, particularly for those on lower incomes. In addition to that, we'll do a bunch of work to rein in some of the monopoly sectors, banking, supermarkets, building supplies, power, who are earning uh, effectively too much profit as a result of the monopolistic nature of those sectors. So those are two things, but there's a few others in and around the policy platforms. I think those are the two major ones for cost of living.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Young people, around my age, like early 20s, often, disenfranchised and believe there's no point in voting or even getting into politics. So how do we kind of get young people into politics and, convince them to vote?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I mean, I'd be interested to know why you think that is. You're closer to that demographic than I am.
Yeah, yeah, I maybe it's, just the years of, promises and, nothing's happened or, stuff like that. Or maybe it's also potentially these bigger parties kind of not believing young people are important in a way, if you know what I mean. Like like cutting fees free and stuff like that. Stuff that I guess makes younger people feel, you know, they're not gonna help us, so why vote kind of thing. You know?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I can understand that. There's a lot of different sort of communities in our country at the moment who feel disenfranchised and cut out from the decision-making process. Um, I mean, my answer to that would be then vote to kick the bums out. Like there is no other way it's going to change unless disenfranchised communities decide to exercise their agency at the ballot box. You know, the people who continue to vote these parties in will continue to vote. That is
Yeah,
a guarantee.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, but I can understand that. Like, if you can't see yourself represented in a system and you don't feel like the system talks to you, what's the point? Just sort of focus, just hunker down, focus on what you can control. But then it's up to parties like us who do want to speak to disenfranchised groups like students and say that we have a vision that includes you guys. Not just we have a vision, but let's build it together. I mean, our citizens assemblies policy is a really good example of wanting a democracy that isn't just sort of this top down sort of voice of God. Here's the policy to you, people at the bottom go. That our democracy should listen to communities, and actually a lot of the hardest decisions that we need to make as a country, those decisions or the voices around those decisions have a direct line to politicians. Politicians need to listen to those voices, and right now we haven't really got those mechanisms. We've got things like select committees. They're kind of stuffy. They're kind of old school. They work if it's like, oh, you've been given 3:30 p.m. on a Tuesday to come talk to politicians. Like, okay, yeah, but what if I have to work at 3:30? What if I'm not comfortable talking to a group of politicians in a room? So we actually have to build to bring people back into our political system. And as far as I can see, there is not a political party that's prepared to like redesign some of the infrastructure of our political system to ensure that voices really get heard. Which is another big reason why Opportunity is the party for me.
Yeah. On that note, do you kind of think the voting age should be lowered to 16 for like young people in schools to kind of learn about politics and
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, there are a few reasons for it. The reason I think is the strongest is sort of to pull on a little bit of old American history. No taxation without representation. If you're 16 and you can pay tax on your paper job or your bar job, you deserve to have a say as to how that taxes get spent. So, as far as I'm concerned, that's just fair.
yeah. Um, and also kind of on that same note, what would you say to people who say, your party's kind of never got in, it's a wasted vote kind of f feeling.
I would say I get that because for the last three cycles, I was that. Um, it's a totally valid response. I guess the thing I would ask people is imagine how you want to feel when you walk out of the ballot box. Do you want to walk out of the ballot box kind of holding your nose and being like, oh, I voted for the lesser of two evils here because if I do the maths, they might get in, blah, 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 blah. Or do you want to walk out and say, I voted for the party that I believe in? Like, let's not overcomplicate this. Vote for the party you think would be best, in the beehive. As simple as that. Um, Follow your gut, which is rich coming from a party of like total policy wonks and nerds. Where our biggest line of advice is follow your gut. But yeah, that's what I'd say to people. Do what makes you feel right.
Yeah. And I mean, you've touched on a few policies, but like, what's maybe one or two that you kind of are like really proud of?
Um, yeah, I mean, not to bang the drum again, but the tax policy is massive. Like, tax is just this invisible force that influences every single purchase, home decision, study decision, family decision. It's just massive. It's like this, it's like the force in Star Wars, it's just always there, omnipresent. And so if those settings are wrong, everything's going to be harder to fix. If those settings are right, everything will be easier to fix. So I really do bang the drum for significant tax reform in New Zealand. We are using an old operating software. It was awesome in like 1995, but you know, operating a piece of software that was built before the Berlin Wall came down and before the first text message was sent, which is what we're operating on in this day and age, is just a recipe for disaster, and we're feeling that pain now. Aside from the tax policy, I'm really excited for a policy that we'll be launching in the next couple of months around cleaning up politics, which is about limiting political donations, transparency around lobbyists. Again, it's one of those things that's not like super sexy, but it's about building systems that work that influence every single decision. It's like, you know, if you're building a house, you could focus on, oh, where are we going to put the kitchen? What color are we going to paint the bedrooms? I'm more interested in like, let me look under the house and let me see the foundations. I want to know that the foundations are solid, because then you've got options. Then you can build, and do things for the long term. And frankly, our tax foundations and our political foundations, the systems that underpin everything else, are not fit for purpose. And so that's, as a party still of policy nerds and wonks, we are interested in the system settings, not necessarily sort of these little sort of tutus that and tweaks that a lot of policy parties will sort of take to the election, which are more like sugar hits and window dressing as opposed to structural foundational change.
Yeah. And then um, I don't know if you can even answer this one yet, but if you do get over that 5% threshold, would you kind of join any party? Like, or do you have like, like a bottom line kind of thing that you have to have?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we're starting to have those kind of conversations now, that things are looking more, looking more and more likely that that's going to be the case. Um, and we get that a lot, like, oh, would you go left or would you go right? Are you more left or are you more right as a party? And I can tell you right now that we'll never pick a side. Um, because the thing that New Zealand needs right now is not another party on the right or another party on the left. It needs a kingmaker that can work with both parties constructively. That's the thing we're missing. The example I often use is, in rowing, you have the big dudes up the front, big girls up the front pulling the oars, but you also have the coxswain at the back who's steering and keeping time. And like, you need that relationship between the big force that's taking you forward and the sense of direction, that is also required. Otherwise, you're just going to end up bashing into the left bank and then bashing into the right bank, which is what we've got at the moment, the sort of flip flopping. So we will hold on to that centrism and that kingmaker ability to work constructively with both parties very tightly. We will not let it go, no matter how much people want to put us into a left or right box. Because that's what New Zealand needs. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess just the last thing is, where can people find you guys and, all the updates and policies and stuff like that?
Yeah, sure. Opportunity.org.nz is the website. We're on most of the main social channels. We also are trying something new in the membership space. So we're at a record number of members at the moment, and we've built our own digital, like, online community platform where members can talk directly to leadership, where we can co-create stuff. Um, yeah, meet as local groups. So if there's some, local like a group in your suburb, it's easy to get together or go have a coffee together. So we've built, as far as we're aware, the first of these kind of platforms in political New Zealand history. We want to do things differently. So anyone who feels like they're a policy nerd and wants to meet other policy nerds and and feel part of a real movement that's going to Wellington, that's the place for you, and that's just behind the membership sign up process.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's all I had. Yeah, again, thank you for doing this.
No worries, mate.